For 6 years, I poured my soul into my parents' cafe, taking it from a failing sandwich counter to a beloved community hub, all for free. Then they gave it to my brother. So I walked out, taking all my recipes and the cafe's entire customer base with me. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The smell of stale beer and bleach always made my stomach turn, but on that particular Tuesday, the scent was overwhelming. I was on my hands and knees in the cafe's single, cramped bathroom, scrubbing the tile grout with a toothbrush because our cleaning service had bylaid. My head was pounding, a dull throb that had lived behind my eyes for 3 days. I was running a low-grade fever, my body aching with exhaustion, but the monthly health inspection was the next morning. It had to be perfect. I'd been at the cafe since 4 a.m., prepping the dough for our signature pastries, finalizing the new seasonal soup list, and covering the morning shift for a barista who called in sick. It was now 9 p.m. This was my life. I was Rachel, the 30-year-old manager of the Corner Nook, my parents' cafe. And manager was the understatement of the century. I was the chef, the baker, the HR department, the menu designer, the social media manager, and, as of today, the janitor. I had come here 6 years ago, fresh out of culinary school with a prestigious apprenticeship under my belt. I found my parents, Timothy and Cynthia, drowning. The cafe was a simple, failing deli they'd bought on a whim. It was losing money, the menu was uninspired, and my father was working himself into an early grave. "Just for a year, Rachel," my mom had pleaded. "Just help us get it stable." So I stayed. I tore up the old menu and introduced my grandmother's recipes, refined with my culinary training. I sourced local ingredients, built relationships with farmers, and created the Nook's signature lavender honey latte. I trained a staff of young, passionate baristas. I handled the catering orders, the Instagram account, the payroll, and the endless, crushing paperwork. I did all of this without a salary. "It's for the family," my father would say, patting my shoulder. "We're building a legacy." I'd worked 80-hour weeks, missed vacations, and poured every cent of my savings into new equipment when the ancient espresso machine finally died. The Corner Nook wasn't just stable. It was a local staple, the heart of the neighborhood, and I was the one who had made it so. I finally pushed myself up from the cold tile, my knees cracking in protest. The fever was making me dizzy. I just needed to lock up and sleep for a few hours before the 4 a.m. alarm. As I walked through the quiet, dark cafe, I saw a light on in the small back office. My parents were there, along with my brother Isaac and his wife Jessica. This was odd. Isaac rarely came by unless he needed to borrow money. I heard Jessica's high, sharp laugh. "It's perfect. Oh, Isaac, the kids will finally have some stability." My stomach clenched. I pushed the door open, my hand still holding the wet, bleach-stained rag. They all froze. My mother, Cynthia, had a bottle of cheap champagne on the desk. My father, Timothy, looked down, shuffling papers. Isaac was grinning, holding a set of keys, the master keys to the cafe, the ones I kept in the safe. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Rachel, honey," my mother started, her voice too bright. "We were going to tell you tomorrow. We have wonderful news." Jessica stepped forward, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Tim and Cynthia are finally retiring. They just signed all the paperwork. Isaac is the new owner of the Corner Nook." The room went silent. The rag slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a wet smack. I looked at my brother Isaac, who worked an unstable real estate job and couldn't manage his own bank account. Then I looked at my father, who still wouldn't meet my gaze. "What?" I whispered. The single word felt like broken glass in my throat. "It's for the family, sweetie," my mother said, her smile tightening. "Isaac has kids. He has a family to support. You understand? You've just been helping out, but he needs a real future. It's his legacy to carry on." Helping out. 6 years of my life. No pay, no credit, no days off. All the recipes that were mine, the staff I had trained, the community I had built. I looked at the new espresso machine I had bought with my own inheritance money from my grandmother. My father finally looked up, his eyes full of a pathetic, familiar guilt. "Rachel, it's the right thing to do, for the grandchildren." I didn't cry, I didn't scream. The fever, the exhaustion, and the sudden, crushing weight of the betrayal solidified into a single, cold point of clarity in my chest. I had been a fool. I turned, walked out of the office, and grabbed my jacket from the hook. I took the small, leather-bound notebook from under the counter, my personal recipe book, the one with every signature item I had ever created for this place. Then I walked to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped out into the cold night air. I left the door unlocked. I left the keys on the counter. I left them all standing there in the office, and I walked away. The betrayal was worse than the exhaustion, worse than the fever, worse than the 6 years of unpaid labor. It was absolute. The first 24 hours were a blur. I went home to my tiny apartment, the one I could barely afford by dog-sitting on my off hours, and slept. I don't think I dreamt. I just fell into a black, feverish void. When I woke up, it was dark outside again. My phone, which I'd silenced, was a blinking beacon of chaos on my nightstand. 64 missed calls, half from my mother, half from my father, 28 text messages. "Mom, Rachel, you forgot to lock up. The morning shift is here." 5:01 a.m. Mom, where are you? The produce delivery is here. 6:30 a.m. Dad, Rachel, this isn't funny. 7:15 a.m. Mom, Isaac can't find the payroll passwords. 9:20 a.m. Mom, where's the recipe for the lavender syrup? The customers are asking. 10:00 a.m. Mom, Rachel, you are being incredibly selfish. Call Emmy now. 12:00 p.m. I read them all with a strange, numb detachment. My fever had broken, leaving behind a cold, hollow clarity. I made myself a cup of tea, not the cafe's custom blend, just a simple, generic bag. It tasted like ash. My phone rang again. It was Marco, my head barista. He was a sweet kid, just 22, and I'd trained him myself. He was the only one I'd given my personal cell number to for emergencies. I guess this qualified. I picked up. "Rachel, oh, thank goodness," he sounded breathless. "Are you okay? Your parents are here and your brother. Rachel, it's a disaster." "What's happening, Marco?" I asked, my voice flat. "Your brother, Isaac, he's in charge. He showed up this morning with his wife, Jessica, and she tried to streamline the morning rush. She told me I was using too much espresso per shot and that we should water down the cold brew to increase margins. And Isaac, he's in the back office. I think he's trying to figure out the register, but he just keeps yelling." He paused, and I heard a muffled crash in the background. "Marco," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "he can't find your recipes. The laminated cards are gone. The binder is gone." "I have them, Marco," I said quietly. "They're mine." Oh, there was a long silence. "Oh, okay, good, what do you want me to do? Mrs. Henderson is here for her usual scone, but your mom tried to bake them this morning using the premix from the box, and, Rachel, they're like hockey pucks. Mrs. Henderson she's not happy." I closed my eyes, picturing the elderly woman who came in every single morning, rain or shine. I knew her order by heart: a blueberry lemon scone, extra glaze, and a small black coffee. "It's not your problem, Marco," I said. "It's not my problem anymore either. Your loyalty is appreciated, but you need to look out for yourself. I'm not coming back." I hung up before he could reply. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, applying for jobs online. Chef positions, line cook, even barista. My resume was complicated. 6 years of high-level management, menu design, and operations experience all at one place. All for family. All unpaid. How do you explain that? As I was typing, an internal thought, one I had suppressed for years, rose to the surface. It was a cold, hard little fact that I had kept locked away. They forgot about the lease. My father had been the original signatory years ago. But when we'd done the big renovation 3 years prior, the one I designed and oversaw, the one I'd paid for the new fixtures for with my inheritance, we had to renegotiate with the landlord. My father, with his bad credit, couldn't get the loan for the upgrades. So I had. And to secure the loan, the landlord had insisted my name be added to the lease as a primary tenant and operations manager. I had been so busy, so exhausted, I'd signed the papers and forgotten about it. But they had forgotten too. They had forgotten that, while they owned the business, I was one of the people who legally controlled the space. This thought, this little seed of an idea, was the first thing that made me feel alive in days. I pulled up my old files. I found the scanned copy of the lease. My name was there, right next to my father's. My phone buzzed again, a new text from my mother. "Mom, your brother is the owner now, Rachel. You walking out is a betrayal of this family. We gave you a place to work for 6 years, and this is how you repay us." I looked at the text. I looked at the lease agreement on my screen. They had forgotten one crucial T. Hing. I didn't reply. I just saved the document to a new folder on my desktop. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand my family. My father, Timothy, is a dreamer. He loves the idea of a charming family business, but he hates the reality of 4 a.m. bake-offs and clogged toilets. My mother, Cynthia, is the practical one, which means she's obsessed with appearances and status. And then there's my brother, Isaac. Isaac has always been the golden boy. He was the firstborn, the son. He got the new car, the college tuition, the endless loans to start his series of failed businesses. I was the responsible one. I got good grades, a scholarship, and the expectation that I would clean up everyone else's messes. When I came back from culinary school, I was on a high. I'd been working 16-hour days in a Michelin-starred kitchen, and I loved it. I had a path. Then I saw the cafe. My parents had sunk their retirement into it, and it was failing. My father looked gray and defeated. My mother was teary and hysterical. "It was Timothy's dream," she cried. "We'll lose the house." So I stayed. I put my dreams on hold to save theirs. For the first year, it was a triage. I worked from open to close, slept for 4 hours, and did it again. I cut the deadweight items, introduced a simple, fresh menu, and slowly the regulars started coming. Not for my parents' weak coffee, but for my tomato basil soup, for my flourless chocolate cake. After I'd stabilized the finances, I wanted to leave. "Not yet," my mother would say. "We're just getting on our feet. What would we do without you?" Then Isaac married Jessica. Jessica was polished with perfect nails, a vague influencer job, and a backbone of pure, unadulterated steel. She saw the cafe, which was now thriving, as a personal bank. She'd bring the kids in and let them run wild, demanding free food for her playgroup, and loudly complaining if the lattes weren't perfect. "It's a family business, isn't it?" she'd say with a tinkling laugh. "We're family." She was the one who started the legacy talk. "Isaac needs to be thinking of his children, Timothy," I'd overheard her saying to my father last Christmas. "He needs something stable, something to pass down. This little cafe is perfect." I'd brushed it off. How could they pass down something they didn't even know how to run? Surely my parents, who had watched me sacrifice my 20s for this place, would see how ridiculous that was. But I'd underestimated Jessica. She was an expert at painting Isaac as a responsible father struggling against the world, while I was painted as the carefree, childless hobbyist who was just playing restaurant. The day after I walked out, I got a text from her. Not from a blocked number, but from Isaac's phone. "Isaac's phone, I know you're upset, Rachel, but you need to be an adult. You can't just abandon your family. Isaac is the owner now, and you need to come show him how to work the big oven. And I can't find the supplier list for the good chocolate." It wasn't a request, it was a command. I ignored it. A few hours later, a new text. "Isaac's phone, if you don't send me the recipe for the scones by tomorrow, I'm just going to find a new one online. Your secret recipes aren't that special." The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. I had developed that scone recipe over months, a perfect balance of lemon zest and butter. It was the cafe's #1 seller. I knew then that this wasn't just my parents' weakness. It was a coup orchestrated by Jessica. She had convinced them that Isaac, with his family, deserved the business I had built, and that I, the single, childless daughter, was just a stepping stone. My father was too weak to fight her, and my mother was too blinded by the idea of grandchildren and legacy to see the injustice. They had handed my life's work to the two most incompetent people I knew. I felt a sudden, sharp anger that burned away the last of my numbness. This wasn't just about the cafe. It was about the 6 years they had stolen from me. It was about the assumption that my work, my skill, and my sacrifice were worthless because I didn't have a husband and kids. I looked at the lease on my computer screen again. They had forgotten one crucial thing. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call my family. I called a lawyer. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Alina, listened to my entire story without interruption. I laid it all out. The 6 years of unpaid labor, the recipes, the inheritance money I'd sunk into renovations, and the final, critical piece of evidence, the lease agreement with my name on it. When I finished, she clicked her pen and looked at me over her glasses. "Rachel," she said, "they didn't just forget one thing, they forgot everything. You're not just a tenant on that lease, you're a partner." "What do you mean?" "You've been performing the duties of an operating partner for 6 years. You've invested your own capital." She tapped the bank statements I'd brought, showing the transfer for the espresso machine. "You've handled all operations, and you've done it all without compensation. This isn't just a family dispute. This is a clear case of unjust enrichment and breach of a partnership agreement, even if it was an unwritten one." She explained the clever trap that I had stumbled into, or rather, that they had built for themselves. By adding my name to the lease to secure the renovation loan, they had legally tied me to the fate of the business. And by transferring ownership to Isaac without my consent, they had violated that lease. "But they own the business, the LLC," I argued. "They own the name," Alina corrected. "But you, Rachel, co-control the location. And a cafe with no location is just a book of recipes, which, by the way, are your intellectual property since you never signed a work-for-hire agreement." The plan we formulated was simple. We weren't going to fight them for the ownership they'd given Isaac. We were going to let them have it, for now. "Go dark," Alina advised. "Don't answer their calls. Let them see what the business is really worth without you. In the meantime, I'm going to draft a letter to your landlord and a formal demand letter for your parents. We'll start with your back pay." She did the math. 6 years at a conservative 60 hours a week, we both knew it was more, at a modest manager's salary, plus overtime, plus the cost of the equipment I'd paid for. The number was staggering. Meanwhile, the cafe was imploding. Marco was my inside man, though I'd urged him to find another job. "It's a train wreck, Rachel, I can't look away," he'd texted me. Day 3, Jessica tried to change the menu. She printed new ones on cheap paper with clip art. She's replaced your farmer's market quiche with a quick quiche made from store-bought pie crusts, and she's raised the prices on everything. Then, day 4, Isaac tried to fix the espresso machine with a wrench. "There's water everywhere. We're serving drip coffee only." He's blaming the shoddy equipment you bought. The best or worst update came on day 5. Day 5, Jessica is redecorating. She's put up fake ivy everywhere and a live, laugh, love sign over the counter. She's playing her own Chill Boss playlist. It's all pop music. Mrs. Henderson came in, took one look, and walked out. She said, "This isn't the Nook." While Jessica was busy destroying the ambience, Isaac was destroying the reputation. He was rude to customers, blaming them for confusing orders. He'd been caught smoking out back, leaving the front counter completely unattended. The glowing 4.8-star Yelp review I had painstakingly built was plummeting. "Worst service ever," one new review read. "The new owners are a joke. What happened to Rachel?" "The coffee tastes like burnt water and the new manager, the owner's son, was incredibly rude," said another. "Such a shame. This used to be my favorite spot." The regulars were leaving. The cafe I had built was dying. And as I watched it happen, I felt a strange, cold calm. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist. Elena sent the first letter. A formal demand for 6 years of back pay, itemized and calculated down to the cent. It was delivered via courier to my parents' home. The response was immediate. My phone exploded. This time it wasn't just my parents, it was Isaac. He didn't call, he just sent a text. "You will not get a single penny, you selfish witch. Dad is so stressed his heart is hurting. This is all your fault." Then my father called. I let it go to voicemail. "Rachel, honey, please." His voice was a weak, reedy thing. This lawyer, this is a mistake. You're tearing the family apart. We can talk about this, just call me." I saved the voicemail. Elena had told me too. The true investigation, however, was into Isaac. Elena, with her network, had hired a private investigator. "Just a hunch," she'd said. The hunch paid off. Isaac wasn't just unsteady in real estate. He was drowning in debt. He had 2 pending lawsuits against him for deals gone bad and a string of creditors. He wasn't just given the cafe as a legacy. He was given it as a lifeline, a cash-flowing asset he could borrow against. And that's exactly what he'd done. The day after the ownership was transferred, he had already taken out a massive loan against the business. "They didn't just give him the cafe, Rachel," Elena said, her voice grim. "They've tied its entire value to his personal, toxic debt. He's going to bankrupt them." The trap was set. Now, we just had to wait for them to walk into it. The first confrontation happened, as I'd expected, at my apartment. They didn't call. They just showed up. My mother, my father, and Isaac. I saw them through the peephole. My mother, Cynthia, looked furious, her face a mask of pinched indignation. Isaac looked smug, bouncing on his heels like he'd already won. My father, Timothy, just looked gray and exhausted, standing a step behind them. I opened the door. "Rachel, thank goodness." My mother pushed past me into my tiny living room. "We need to talk. You need to call off this lawyer." "It's a demand letter, Mom," I said, staying by the open door. "It's a request for payment for services rendered." "Services rendered?" she scoffed. "You were family, we gave you a place to go." "You gave me a failing business that I turned into a success," I said, my voice even. I looked at Isaac. "A success you're managing to destroy in less than a week." "The business is fine," Isaac snapped. "It's a transition period. The staff is lazy, especially that kid Marco. I had to fire him." My blood ran cold. "You fired Marco?" "He was insubordinate," Isaac said with a shrug. "And he kept forgetting how to make things my way. We're better off." "Your way," I said. "Watering down the coffee and serving boxed mix, that's your big business plan." "It's called profitability, Rachel," Jessica said, emerging from the hallway. I hadn't even seen her. She'd been lurking, listening. "Something you clearly know nothing about. You were just giving things away." "I was building a community," I shot back. "Something you know nothing about." "Enough," my father finally spoke. His voice was strained. "Rachel, this number, this amount of money, it's ridiculous. We don't have it." "You did," I said. "The business had it before you gave it to him." I looked at Isaac. "You've already taken a loan against the cafe, haven't you? The day after you got it." Isaac's smug look evaporated. My mother's eyes widened. "What? Isaac, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," Isaac shouted, his face turning red. "She's trying to poison you against me." "Am I?" I said. I pulled a file from my coffee table. Elena had told me to keep copies. "Because this is a public filing. A UCC lien against the Corner Nook, LLC for $50,000. To a creditor I know you've been dodging for months. You didn't get the cafe as a gift, Isaac. You got it as a bailout. And you've already strapped it with your personal debt." My mother's face went white. She turned to my father. "Timothy, you told me this was to secure his future, not to pay off his past." My father couldn't speak. He just stared at the paper in my hand. "He's going to sink you," I said, my voice quiet. He's going to take the business I built, the business you've owned for 20 years, and he's going to drive it into bankruptcy in less than 6 months. All because you were so desperate to give him something he never earned." Jessica lunged forward, her mask of polish completely gone. "You've got no right. After all we've done for you, you were just the help. You were never going to get the café." "I don't want the café," I said, and the truth of the words surprised me. "I just want what I'm owed, 6 years of my life." "You'll get nothing," Isaac yelled, his voice cracking. "It's mine, it's all mine." "That's where you're wrong," I said. I pulled out the second document. "This is a copy of the lease for the building, the one with my name on it. As an operating partner, any transfer of ownership or the incurring of new debt against the business required my signature, which it does not have." I looked at my father. "You violated the lease, Dad, and you," I looked at Isaac, "committed bank fraud." The silence in the room was absolute. Jessica's jaw was on the floor. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. My father, Timothy, had to lean against the wall, his hand over his heart. "You've been served a demand for payment," I said, my voice like ice. "My lawyer, Alina, will be in touch with her next steps. Now get out of my apartment." No one moved. I said get out. My mother, for the first time in my life, looked truly afraid. They shuffled out of the door, a defeated, pathetic mess. Isaac was the last to leave. He stopped in the doorway and looked at me, his eyes full of a venomous hatred I hadn't known he was capable of. "You've ruined this family," he whispered. "No, Isaac," I said, and I closed the door in his face. "You all did that yourselves." The fallout was immediate. My father, predictably, had a health scare. My mother used it as a weapon. "He's in the hospital," she shrieked into my voicemail. "His heart, the stress you've caused, the doctors say he needs to rest. How could you do this to your own father?" I called the hospital. He was in for observation, for high blood pressure. He'd been released the same day. Meanwhile, Isaac and Jessica were in full panic mode. They were trying to liquidate. They held a grand reopening, sale, slashing prices on everything. They were selling off the high-end grinders, the custom mugs, even the rustic wooden tables I had spent a weekend refinishing myself. They were trying to squeeze every last drop of cash out of the place before loan I'd exposed came crashing down on them. But the real case was building on another front. After I fired Marco, he'd felt lost. I'd offered to help him find a new job, but he'd said, "First, I want to help you." He started talking to the other staff who had been fired or quit. 2 of the young baristas Isaac had let go for being loyal to Rachel came forward. They told stories of Isaac taking cash from the register at the end of the night and putting it directly into his pocket, long before he'd even recorded the day's sales. He wasn't just in debt, he was actively skimming. Then Alina found the big one. The unsteady real estate job wasn't just unsteady. It was fraudulent. Isaac and his wife Jessica were involved in a small-scale property scam, convincing elderly people to sign up for reverse mortgages that were actually high-interest, predatory loans, with the commission funneled to a shell company owned by Jessica. "They're not just amateurs, Rachel," Alina said, her voice sharp. "They're criminals, and they've been using your parents' good name and now your café as a home base for their operations. The café loan wasn't for his old debts. It was to cover a new, much more serious lawsuit they're facing." The pieces clicked into place. The desperation, the need to get a stable business, they were looking for a clean asset to bleed dry. It was time for the second confrontation. This one wasn't for me, it was for my parents. I called my mother. "I'm coming over. We are going to talk with or without lawyers, and you need to be there, both of you." I arrived at their house. It was the first time I'd been there in months. The garden I used to tend was overgrown with weeds. I found them in the kitchen, sitting at the table in silence. They looked older, defeated. "I'm not here to talk about my back pay," I said, placing a thick file on the table. "I'm here to talk about Isaac." "We don't want to hear it," my mother said, her voice weak. "You have to," I said. He's not just in debt, Mom, he's a criminal. He and Jessica are being sued for fraud. They're preying on old people. I laid out the documents. The articles of incorporation for Jessica's shell company. The testimony from one of the victims' families. This is a lie, my father whispered, but he picked up the paper. He read it. His hands started to shake. He took out the $50,000 loan against the cafe to pay the retainer for the lawyer on this case, I explained. He's not just running the cafe into the ground, Mom. He's using it to fund his and Jessica's crimes. He's making you and Dad accomplices. My mother started to cry, a dry, racking sob. He's our son. He makes mistakes. This isn't a mistake, Mom, I said, my voice rising for the first time. This is a pattern. You've been enabling it his whole life. And you sacrificed my life, my work, my future to prop him up. And for what? So he could destroy you too. My father put his head in his hands. What? What do we do, Rachel? What do we do? You're going to stop him, I said. The business transfer, the loan, it's all invalid. We can prove it was done under fraudulent pretenses. We can void the transfer, but you have to be the ones to do it. You have to choose. Choose, my mother wept, between our children. No, I said, the ice returning to my voice. You're going to choose between your son and your own survival, because if you let him continue, he will take this house. He will take your savings. He will take everything, just like he tried to take from me, and he won't even blink. I stood up. Elena, my lawyer, is expecting your call. She can help you file the complaint. Or you can sit here and wait for the police to show up when his entire house of cards collapses. I left the file on the table. As I walked to the door, my father's voice, small and broken, stopped me. Rachel, he's at the cafe, he's meeting someone, an investor. He said it was going to save us. I looked at my watch. It was 7 p.m. The cafe had been closed for hours. He's not saving you, Dad, I said. He's selling off the last of the parts. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't going to be a quiet legal battle. This was going to end. Tonight. The cafe was dark, but I could see a dim light on in the back office. I still had my original key. The one they'd never asked for, the one I'd had cut 6 years ago at the hardware store. It slid into the lock with a quiet, familiar click. I slipped inside. The cafe was a ghost. The fake ivy Jessica had strung up was drooping. The live, laugh, love sign was crooked. It smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I heard voices from the office. Isaac's and another man's, deeper and rougher. So, you get the title to all the kitchen equipment, free and clear, Isaac was saying, his voice high and fast. The espresso machine alone is worth 20, but I'm willing to part with the whole. E-lot for 15 cash, tonight. And the owners, the parents, the man asked. They're on board, they've signed off. It's all legit, Isaac lied. I walked to the main breaker panel, tucked away in the pantry. I knew it like the back of my hand. With a firm pull, I threw the main switch. The entire cafe, including the back office, was plunged into total darkness. What the hell? The man's voice boomed. It's just a fuse, Isaac yelped. Stay here. I heard the office door open and Isaac fumbling his way into the main room. Who's there? I flicked on the powerful flashlight I'd brought. I aimed the beam directly at his face. He froze, a terrified animal caught in the light, his hand outstretched. Hello, Isaac, I said. My voice echoed in the empty room. Rachel, what are you doing? You can't be here. This is a private property sale, Isaac, the other man said, emerging from the office, using his own phone as a light. He was a large, imposing man, and he looked angry. Who is this? She's no one, Isaac shrieked. I'm Rachel, I said, moving the beam of light to the new man. I'm the operating partner for this business and the co-signer on the lease for this building. And you, I swung the light back to my brother, are committing fraud. What is she talking about, kid? The man said, turning on Isaac. She's lying. I'm the owner. I have the papers. Do you? I said. I walked to the counter. and just as I'd heard them, car doors slammed outside. The front door of the cafe burst open, and the room was flooded with light. It was my parents, but they weren't alone. Elena was with them, as were two police officers. My mother, her face stained with tears, but set with a new, fragile resolve, pointed a shaking finger at Isaac. "That's him," she said. "That's our son, and he's been stealing from us." That was the moment. The look on Isaac's face, the pure, unfiltered shock, was something I would never forget. His smugness, his entitlement, it all dissolved, leaving behind the terrified, weak-willed boy he'd always been. "Mom, Dad, what is this?" he stammered. "It's over, Isaac," my father said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. He was holding the file I'd given him. "It's all over." Jessica, who must have been waiting in the car, suddenly ran in. "What is going on? Isaac, who are these people?" She saw the police, she saw me, and her face contorted. "You," she screamed at me. "You did this, you, witch." "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "you need to calm down." "He's selling assets that don't belong to him, officer," Elena said, stepping forward, all professional calm. "This business transfer was fraudulent, and we have reason to believe Mr. Isaac and his wife, Jessica, are involved in several other financial crimes." As if on cue, a second set of police cars pulled up. These were not local cops. They were detectives. Someone, likely from the other fraud case, had been tipped off. The investor Isaac was meeting with, seeing the uniforms, put his hands up. "Hey, I'm out of this. The kid said it was a legit sale. I'm leaving." He wisely backed out of the cafe. Jessica began to hyperventilate. "We didn't do anything. This is a family matter." "It stopped being a family matter, Jessica," I said, "when you decided to use my parents' life savings to fund your scams." My father, in a final, powerful moment of realization, stepped up to his son. "You've lied to us. You've stolen from us. You broke your mother's heart, Isaac." Isaac looked from my father to my mother, to the police, and finally to me. He had nothing. No more lies, no more protectors. He was, finally, empty. As the officers began to separate them, reading them their rights for the other, more serious fraud charges, my father turned to me. His face was a wreck of shame and grief. He didn't say anything. He just reached into his pocket and handed me the original set of keys to the cafe, the ones he'd given to Isaac. I took them from his trembling hand. The cold metal felt impossibly heavy. I looked around the dark, broken cafe, my cafe. I walked to the breaker box, and with a heavy thunk, I turned the lights back on. The downfall was swift and total. Isaac and Jessica's world collapsed. Faced with the mountain of evidence from their predatory loan scam, combined with my parents' own complaint of fraud regarding the cafe, they had no choice. They lost everything. The cafe was returned to my parents' name, the fraudulent loan voided. Isaac and Jessica both faced significant legal consequences, ending in a messy plea deal that involved probation, community service, and a restitution order so large it would follow them for the rest of their lives. My parents were left with a hollowed-out business and an even more hollowed-out family. They had to sell their house to cover their own legal fees and to begin paying off the debts Isaac had accrued in their name. And me, I didn't take the cafe back. I couldn't. Walking back into that space felt like walking back into a life I had outgrown. The betrayal had burned away my old sense of duty. But I was still owed. My lawyer, Elena, was brilliant. We pivoted from the family lawsuit to a professional one. I filed a formal claim against the business, the Corner Nook, LLC, for my 6 years of back pay, my personal investment, and the intellectual property of my recipes. My parents, humbled and broken, didn't fight. They couldn't. They settled. They sold the cafe, the location, the name, the bones of it, to a chain. The small proceeds they made went almost entirely to me. It wasn't the full, staggering amount I was owed, but it was enough. It was a start. 6 months later, I used that money as a down payment. Not on a cafe, but on a small, bright studio space in a different part of town. I called it the kitchen. It wasn't a cafe, it was a workshop. I started small, baking custom orders, and most importantly, teaching. I taught the baking classes I'd always wanted to, sharing the recipes that I had fought to get back. Marco, my loyal head barista, became my first employee. He was a natural teacher, and the young kids loved him. About a month after we opened, my father walked in. He was thinner, and the gray in his hair was more pronounced. He stood by the door for a long time, just watching me teach a class of retirees how to properly fold croissant dough. When the class was over, he approached the counter. "Rachel," he said, his voice quiet. He pushed a small, crumpled paper bag across the counter. I was at the grocery store. They had that lavender you always liked." I looked in the bag. It was a small bunch of local, organic lavender. "Thank you, Dad," I said. It's beautiful what you've built here," he said, looking around. "It's all you." "It is," I said. It wasn't cold, but it was firm. It was a boundary. "Your mother, she'd like to see you. She misses you." "I'm here, Dad," I said, gesturing to my new life. "I'm not hiding, but I'm not who I was." He nodded, understanding. It was the first time in my life he had ever truly seen me, not as a support system, but as a person. He left the lavender and walked out. It wasn't forgiveness, not really. And it wasn't a full reconciliation. It was just a beginning. A new, fragile beginning built on a foundation of truth instead of obligation. That night, as I was locking up my own studio, my own keys in my hand, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. I hadn't just gotten my recipes back. I had gotten my life back. The cafe had been my parents' dream, one I was forced to carry. The kitchen was mine.